like to suggest right to begin with that in all Christian circles, including your church and all other evangelical churches, we do not have a theology on sanctification. We have a theology on justification. We have classes on it. We have books on it. We have the understanding and the treatment of the atonement and what happens in justification. But you'll be hard put to find a book or a class on sanctification that gives you a clear picture of exactly what happens and what can be expected in the ongoing Christian life. It appears that most everyone has been left to discover for himself by accident. Now, we have a book in our Adventist library called The Sanctified Life, which deals somewhat with the subject. And we have many, many statements, quotations on the subject. But there are many people in my own subculture who feel that apparently statements go both ways on the subject. And so there's a great deal of confusion in the Christian church, including your own church, in practice, as to what to expect in the Christian life. And one of the biggest questions has to do with the place of human effort. Where does human effort begin? Where does it end? Where does divine power begin and end? How much are we supposed to do, and how much is God going to do for us? So, because of this problem, we hope to give this subject an airing during this quarter. We certainly don't claim to have all the answers. We are only trying to stimulate you to think, to study for yourself, and to try and find a few guidelines together. The fact that we have titled the series, Sanctification by Faith Alone, I suppose already gives you an idea of what we have concluded. Now, we told you last year, I think, about the camp meeting up in Washington, where the editor of our Review and Herald got up and asked the people, how many believe that we were saved by faith alone? 2 or 3 hands went up and came down real quick. Then he asked the next question, how many believe that we are saved by our works? 2 or 3 hands up, down real quick. And of course, the only one left, how many believe we are saved by our faith plus our works? And all the rest of the hands went up. Pleased that they had the right answer, and that the speaker would, of course, congratulate them on the right answer. Instead, he rebuked them, told them he hoped that they would change their mind before the meeting was over that morning. Proceeded to teach from the Bible that we are saved by faith alone. Several years ago, a book came out. The title of it was By Faith Alone, written by Dr. Norval Pease. At that time, our world leader, our General Conference president, was so taken by the book that he promoted and pushed it. And many, many people got the book and read it. I wonder how many of you recall the book, have read it? Very many? All right. Must have been on the other side of the world during that time or something. There were some people who were so uptight about the title of the book that they wouldn't even buy it. By faith alone, they said, no, that's wrong. Not bothering to find out what was meant by it. And particularly for some of us, by faith alone may sound like real heresy. But we believe in justification by faith alone. I haven't heard anyone yet challenge the premise of justification by faith alone, that there's nothing we can do of ourselves to be justified or to have our sins forgiven and have our records clear so that we stand before God as though we had never sinned. There's nothing we can do except to accept it by faith, right? I've never heard any argument on that one. Now, of the three classic words, justification, sanctification, and glorification, I haven't heard anyone yet who will maintain that we are going to be glorified by anything other than by faith alone. Do you know what glorification means? It means what happens to us when Jesus comes again. It has to do with the process of our vile bodies being changed. It has to do with us being translated from earth to heaven and traveling over 105 trillion miles without the aid of spaceship or rocket. And don't tell me that you're going to be able to help that out any. It is going to happen to us completely without our effort, except to have accepted His salvation already, and He's going to do the whole trip from earth to heaven. Is that true? I don't think you'll be able to help out even by any kind of movement that you might make. So, we believe in justification by faith alone. We believe in glorification by faith alone. When these corruptible bodies will become incorruptible, nothing you'll be able to do to help that along. But when it comes to sanctification by faith alone, here is where the problem arises. We say that the reason that crowd of people raised their hands, that we are saved by faith plus works, was because they were thinking of sanctification, right? That's what they were thinking of. Living the ongoing Christian life. And there we all believe that we must have faith in order to do that. But the usual understanding is, I'd like to suggest misunderstanding is, that we have a relationship with God, faith, plus a great deal of work at it besides. Relationship with God plus. I would rather read it from Spalding in his book, Captains of the Host, once more. Most subtle of all deceptions is the conviction set in the minds of most professed Christians that man must strive to be good and to do good, and that when he has done all he can, Christ will come to his aid and help him do the rest. In this confused creed of salvation partly by works and partly with auxiliary power, many trust today. And I'd like to suggest that that is the reason why many, many people are defeated and suffering failure in their Christian life. A combination of God's power plus our power equals no power. Now, sometimes we come along and we say that we are saved by faith alone, and once our justification is settled, then it's safe to work on our sanctification or our Christian life because our salvation is already settled. You might have heard or read that kind of concept. And there are those who have taken the position and have used Spirit of Prophecy quotations to support it. that once we have it settled that our salvation is certain and is taken care of when we've accepted God's justification, then it is safe and legitimate to work on sanctification in some sense in addition to relationship. Because we're not trying to produce our salvation. But I'd like to remind you tonight that all three of them have to do with salvation. Justification, having our sins forgiven, is salvation from our past sins. Sanctification, letting Christ live His life in us, is salvation from our present sinning. Glorification, letting God translate us from earth to heaven and changing our bodies, is salvation from a world of sin. All three of them are salvation. Is this safe enough to say? So let's not say simply that salvation has only to do with justification. Salvation runs through all three of them. With that in mind, I'd like to have you turn to the text in 1 Corinthians 1, verse 30. Which will be our modus operandi, which will be our motto, our theme, our aim, our everything during this series. 1 Corinthians 1:30. We need to constantly remind ourselves of this. But of Him are ye in Christ Jesus, who of God is made unto us four things: wisdom and righteousness and sanctification and redemption. Three of those have to do with the three things we've already talked of here. Righteousness, justification, sanctification, sanctification. Redemption, couldn't this include glorification? He's also made unto us wisdom. Now you students will be glad to know about that. And yet, you get wisdom by studying for it. What does this say? The only true wisdom, the only real wisdom, comes from who? From Jesus. You might get knowledge by studying for it, but wisdom comes from Jesus, just as much as righteousness does. Now notice that all of these are in the same package, and they are, again, all identified in the same way, on the same level. It is Jesus through all of them. Is this clear at all? Now, when we talk about justification, and the fact that when we accept Jesus, we stand before God as though we had never sinned, it is because of Jesus. And there is no such thing as righteousness apart from Jesus. Our only hope, our only way of having any kind of righteousness is to have Jesus. And that has to do with justifying righteousness. It has to do with sanctification righteousness. As this verse suggests, it's the same. You can also go to the book Steps to Christ, and you discover there that the method of remaining and continuing the Christian life is the same as becoming a Christian in the first place. Many have an idea, page 69, that they must do some part of the work alone. They have trusted in Christ for the forgiveness of sin, but now they seek by their own efforts to live aright. But every such effort must fail. Jesus says, without me you can do nothing. Our growth in grace, our joy, our usefulness, all depend upon our union with Christ. It is by communion with Him daily, hourly, by abiding in Him that we are to grow in grace. He is not only the author, but the finisher of our faith. It is Christ first and last and always. Do you ask, how am I to abide in Christ? In the same way you received Him at first. How did you receive Him at first? By faith alone. How do you abide in Him? By faith alone. And then Colossians is quoted, as we have therefore received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk ye in Him. The just shall live by faith. Not only do the just become just by faith, the just live by faith as well. All right? Now, this evening I'd like to cover 3 other points. Number 1, what do we mean when we say by faith alone? Number 2, what do we mean when we use the word sanctification? And number 3, Desire of Ages 668. When we use the term by faith alone, there are many people that get nervous. And there are some who will whip out of their inside coat pocket some quotations. One person will quote, "We hear a great deal about faith. We need to hear a great deal more about works." You ever heard that one? And another person will quote James and say, "By faith alone is not enough." The devils believe, but notice we did not say by belief alone. We said by faith alone. All right, what do we mean by faith alone? If we get this straight, this will save us from some of the flying flack later in the series, perhaps even tonight. Faith always has to have an object. There's no such thing as faith alone. So when we use the term by faith alone, anyone who is the least bit informed on the subject knows that faith is going to have an object. Faith in who? Faith in Jesus. In a sense, the phrase by faith alone could be a misnomer, misleading, not be really rightly stated. But there are many things that we say that we don't bother to define, that most people who are informed already are clear on, right? Let's get it clear tonight. Faith has to have an object. The object is Jesus. And when we say by faith alone, we are simply using a shortened version of by faith in Jesus Christ alone. Do you have that? Will you circle it? And don't forget it. And don't anyone come along next week and say, by faith alone, that's not right. Okay? Do we understand each other? I know that I'm glad for a little flicker on the faces of some of you out there. By faith in Jesus Christ alone. Now, another thing that will save us from flying flack is to understand what faith is. We've been over this before last year, but we need to review it tonight for the purpose of our series. Faith has as its best definition, trust. And this, of course, is supported by the Greek, the original language in which the New Testament was written. Trust is your best single-word definition for faith. The book Education 253 says the same thing. So when we say by faith alone, we're talking about trust in Jesus Christ alone. Now, the next question is, who do you trust? You trust somebody that you know. And that is a principle that is particularly applicable in our world today. In a world where the tragedy of having to distrust everyone until they prove they can be trusted, instead of trusting everyone until they prove they can't be trusted, like yesteryear, in the days of the pioneers, is a well-known tragedy in our world today. But you have to have two things in order to trust somebody. You have to have someone who is absolutely trustworthy, but that's not enough. Secondly, you have to get acquainted with the one who is absolutely trustworthy. And if you get acquainted with them, you will trust them. You can't help it. If you really get to know someone who is absolutely trustworthy, you don't have to try to trust them. You will trust them. Is that safe to say? And it works the same in reverse. Someone who cannot be trusted, you may not distrust them until you get to know them, and when you get to know them, the distrust will be automatic. So when we say by faith in Jesus Christ alone, we are talking about faith as trust, and trust on the basis of knowing Him. Knowing Him. Now, anybody knows that if you're going to know somebody, you have to communicate. That is absolutely essential for getting acquainted. And when you communicate with someone who is absolutely trustworthy, and therefore you get to know him, you will trust him. Now, how do you communicate? By talking to them and by listening to them talk to you. And anybody who has at least been informed in Christian circles knows that communication on that level with God is accomplished through the Bible and through prayer. If this is familiar ground, it is simply review tonight. Then, when we say that we are sanctified by faith alone, please underscore it that we are talking about an experience of getting to trust Jesus because we know Him, because we're communicating with Him, because we're spending time in His Word and on our knees with Him. Therefore, by faith alone automatically suggests all of the elements of a vital, daily, ongoing relationship with Him. Is this clear at all? It includes all of that. And the reason we go through this is to make sure that no one goes out of here and says that they're talking, when they say by faith alone, about nothing more than simply believing, like the devils do. No. And when the little lady writes in her book, we hear a great deal about faith, we should hear a great deal more about works, she is writing from the context of being nervous that people are defining faith in terms of the devil's kind of belief. And her warnings along that line are always in that context. There is a cheap kind of thing called faith by the popular religious world, which is nothing more than saying, I believe. We are not talking about that. We're talking about the person who has an ongoing, daily, personal, meaningful fellowship relationship with Jesus. That's what we mean by faith alone. Have we beat that point to death enough yet? Now, the second point, what do we mean by sanctification? There appears to be a difference of definition in the Bible and in common usage of the term sanctification. I believe you'll find that many people, when they talk about the term sanctification, are talking about some kind of goal that they hope to reach before their life ends. some sort of goal of perfection. Sanctification is not a goal to reach after all your life. If you go through and study your word sanctification in the Bible, you'll discover that most, if not all cases, it is talking about a completed thing, a punctiliar thing, a condition that exists now. It's not something we're aiming for. We're also told in the book Christ Object Lessons that the imputed righteousness of Christ, which is usually associated with the term justification, is our title to heaven. And in the same setting, that the imparted righteousness of Christ, which is usually associated with sanctification, is our fitness for heaven. On that basis, we would have to say that the thief on the cross was sanctified. Oh, you say, no, the thief on the cross was justified only. He didn't have a lifetime of 80 years to try and get in one good day just before he died, so he wouldn't qualify for sanctification. No, on the contrary, it would be ridiculous to say that the thief on the cross had a title to heaven, but was not fit for heaven. And if the imputed righteousness of Christ is necessary for a title and the imparted righteousness for our fitness, then the thief on the cross must have been sanctified too. The only thing is that if the thief on the cross had lived another 80 years, he would have needed to experience sanctification as something for a lifetime. Which means, again, that instead of sanctification being the work of a lifetime, in the sense that just before we die we might make it, sanctification is the work of a lifetime in the same sense that eating is. You keep on eating. The thief on the cross was sanctified in order to be fit for heaven, and he would have to have kept on being sanctified the rest of his life if he'd lived longer. Right? And in that sense, it would have been something that was necessary for a lifetime. However, in popular usage, the term sanctification is used to describe what we ordinarily call Christian growth. And probably we ought to use the term Christian growth instead. But we'll go ahead and use it in that sense. We are using the term not only biblically, but in a popular vernacular. When we use sanctification by faith alone, we're talking about the ongoing Christian life, the growing relationship, the deepening fellowship, the deepening surrender, and so forth. And the third thing I wanted to bring out tonight is the Spirit of Prophecy quotation that goes along with 1 Corinthians 1:30, which is the classic on this subject. Desire of Ages, page 668. All true obedience comes from the heart. It was heart work with Christ. Christ even was our example in this. And if we consent, He will so identify Himself with our thoughts and aims, so blend our hearts and minds into conformity to His will, that when obeying Him, we shall be but carrying out our own impulses. Would you like to have that kind of obedience? Impulsive obedience. Who's going to do it? Jesus is going to do it. And then it says, the will, refined and sanctified, will find its highest delight in doing His service. When we know God as it is our privilege to know Him, Our life will be a life of continual obedience. Do you catch that sentence? When we know God, as it is our privilege to know Him, our life will be a life of continual obedience. Where does continual obedience come from? Say it. From knowing God. Then, if sanctification is the work of a lifetime, notice the term. We're familiar with that phrase. If sanctification is the work of a lifetime, where is the work? In trying hard to obey or in putting forth the effort to know God? Is that clear at all? When we know God, as it is our privilege to know Him, our life will be a life of continual obedience. Now, where in that do you get knowing God plus working hard on it in addition? It's not there. The will, refined and sanctified, will find its highest delight in doing His service through an appreciation of the character of Christ. Through communion with God, sin will become hateful to us. Anyone here having any problem with sin? Get it. Don't miss it. Through an appreciation of the character of Christ. How do you get that? By studying His life day by day, by that thoughtful hour in contemplation of the life of Jesus, right? Through an appreciation of the character of Christ, through communion with God, here you have your devotional life again. Sin will become hateful to us. Now let me ask you this. If sin was hateful to me, would I have to try hard not to sin? Yes or no? If I hated sin, if it was repulsive to me, would I have to try hard not to do it? Well, I'd have to try hard too. Wouldn't I? Is that going too far? And if my will can be sanctified and refined, so I find the highest delight in doing His will and His service, would I have to try hard to do His will? Well, I'd have to try hard not to. Please circle this one paragraph along with 1 Corinthians 1:30 as the entire thrust of this quarter series. Now, in conclusion, I haven't found anyone yet who will argue with this quotation, who will try and get around it in order to preserve some kind of human effort working at it. But I do find that there are many people who say, yes, that quotation in Desire of Ages 668 is true for the end of our Christian life, for the mature Christian, way on down the pike somewhere. We can look forward to that happening to us someday. In the meantime, you better work hard at it so you can get there. Do you follow me? This is what I've understood the usual approach to it. They all say, yes, that's a beautiful experience. That's a beautiful thing. We're all looking forward to that. And someday we'll get there, and then it'll be easy. In the meantime, grit your teeth, take another hitch around the saddle horn, and ride hard, and try hard. And if you can try hard enough, then someday you'll get to where it'll be natural like that. Now, I'd like to point out, as we continue next week, that is not God's plan at all. Logic and reason defy that. Why would God use a plan antagonistic to His ultimate to get us to His ultimate? Would God use works to get us to faith? Would God use trying to get us to try hard to obey so it would become a habit, so someday it would be natural, in order to get us there? I think not. And we hope to point this out clearly as we proceed.
You have been listening to another special American Christian Ministries presentation. This recording has been digitally reprocessed from the original audio cassette or reel-to-reel in order to make this CD available. The audio quality was improved as much as possible. International copyright, American Christian Ministries. All rights reserved. To order a copy of this or other presentations, or for a free catalog, please call toll-free 800-233-4450. International calls dial 717-652-7000. You may also order from our secure website at www.americanchristianministries.org. There you will discover the largest selection of authentic Adventist preaching available. American Christian Ministries is not a one-man band. It is an orchestra of outstanding speakers who are all on the same theological page. If American Christian Ministries has been a blessing to you, why not take a moment just now and send us a note or an email with your testimony? We'll share it with our speakers and volunteer workers to encourage them. Your prayers and continued financial support are very important to ensure the continuation of this ministry as we help prepare America and the world to meet Jesus Christ. He's coming soon.